What is up, everybody? Yes, it's me. You saw this correctly. I did upload a video. So obviously I haven't posted in 2 to 3 years, and I'm gonna be honest, guys. College has been colleging, and I just haven't been as updated and super duper involved in weather forecasting for the past few years. And that's not because I lost interest. It's just I don't know. I didn't have the really time, or um I didn't have really the time to upload as I used to every day or every other day. So yeah, I thought it would be a good time to maybe try to make a comeback. So if you guys are still here, awesome. If you guys aren't, then I understand. But yeah, I thought maybe talk about this record-breaking historic El Nino, and I thought it'd be a good time to maybe make a video and try to get back into things. So yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So as many of you guys know, you probably have heard it all over the news and other forecasters. There is a super duper strong El Nino forecasted for this winter, and it's obviously been in place for the past few months now, and it's not really anything new, but it's crazy how strong it's gone, and we haven't seen anything like this since 2015, 2016 fall winter. So here's the overall Enzo forecast. Again, we have an El Nino advisory, and the SSEs are not only just above average, they're way above average across portions of the central and eastern Pacific. And El Nino conditions are expected to strengthen as we get into closer into the winter. So obviously this is nothing new. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. So the first thing I want to show you guys is the overall SSTs. Let me go ahead and move this to the center. And you guys know this is on Tropical Tidbits, and just look at that big sea of red. I mean, last time I uploaded, I mean, we just saw like at least 2 3 years of La Ninas like back to back to back. So to see an El Nino back, and especially at this strength, it's just incredible. I mean, look at that sea red there in the 3.4 region, and look at the 1 and 2 region off South America. We're seeing temperatures nearly slightly above 2 degrees Celsius above average, and in some spots it's nearly 2.5, and that is basically way above the threshold to be considered a strong El Nino, and it's across the whole Pacific. I mean, this is a super duper strong, and just it's stuck in place. It's gonna be here for, I would say, a while. This El Nino, it'll take a while to taper off, and it's gonna continue to strengthen as we get towards the winter. So that is gonna have a lot of implications for those in the United States for this winter. But again, 1 to 2 degrees above Celsius all across the region, and the sea surface temperatures are just predicted to continue to increase and above average and get warmer and warmer and warmer. So that's the sea surface temperatures. Again, you guys have probably been seeing that for a while now. Now I want to go ahead and get into the 3.4 index region, and just look at that. It hasn't been in the negatives uh, for weeks now, nearly months. And the latest valley is at plus 1.762, which is extremely, extremely strong already. But the fact that we're really forecasted to get possibly a lot higher than that is just ridiculous. So again, we've been at a super duper strong El Nino, and it's just been a persistent linear pattern since April, with the sea surface temperatures getting warmer and warmer as the summer has been rolling through, and they're continue to be predicted to continue to increase as we go through again. We still have a good amount of summer still left to come, and then of course the fall. So by the time we get to the winter, guys, we could have a record-breaking El Nino strength and possibly on par with 2015, 2016, which is, I believe, I could be wrong, the strongest El Nino we've had. Like I said, I haven't been up to date in the weather in the past 2 3 years, so I've forgotten little things as we've gone on. But as of what I know, I'm pretty sure 2015 is like the strongest, if not like top three strongest El Ninos that we've ever had. And I'm actually going to be making comparisons to 2015, 2016, what we saw in those winters, and how that could possibly have implications of what we can get um, this winter. So I'm going to be kind of making comparisons to really strong El Ninos, and that can give you a better idea of what we could possibly expect. So before we get into that really, really nitty gritty information, let me just give you, for those who don't know, overall like what El Nino and La Nina mean. So we're gonna be more focused on El Nino, what that means. So with El Nino, we have really high sea surface temperatures and weaker trade winds in the Pacific, and what that does is that it pushes basically all the moisture in the subtropical jet stream and Pacific jet stream a lot further south rather than being upper further north and toward the Pacific Northwest and Midwest. And the polar jet stream stays pretty strong all across the polar region, so it doesn't really necessarily come all the way down here as much. So what that would basically mean is that we're going to have a drier and warmer, at least based on average, a warmer Midwest Canada region, um, a lot drier as well as the jet stream pushes further south as it follows again that equilibrium and pressure, um, and that moisture is basically just going to stay across the southwest specifically. That's where we see really active flooding and El Ninos. In 2015, I think we had like record breaking flooding across the southwest, and I'm not going to say that's going to happen now, but it's a lot more likely to see a ton of well needed moisture across the south. Again, I'm in Georgia. We've been in a drought all summer long. So again, that jet stream is going to keep stay further south, bring all that moisture from the Pacific, and as well even pushing it from the Gulf, and it's just going to be usually in El Nino you see moisture, a lot more moisture and cooler parts of the south. So again, when you hear El Nino and you live in the south, you think snow, at least compared to La Nina. So again, this could be a pretty good or winter if we go off the average for parts of the southeast, south central, and southwest for moisture and colder temperatures, which, considering I live in Georgia, is what I like to hear. But it's also going to be really strong. So, like, we may even see like deadly and catastrophic flooding. So again, this isn't like a normal El Nino where like you see the typical like a little bit more moisture. This is going to be possibly one of the strongest El Ninos we've ever seen. So it's definitely a lot more serious where we could see too much flooding or really bad droughts in the Midwest. And again, the implications in Asia as well are just catastrophic. Like there could be terrible droughts in Australia and parts of Southeast Asia, which again we'll get more into once we get closer to winter and all that. But again, this is the kind of the typical average you would see in an El Nino, where you see cooler temperatures, not like super crazy, but again, this is also average El Nino. It could obviously again differ greatly, but the overall average would be cooler temperatures in the south and a lot warmer in the parts of the upper Midwest and as you can't see, but in South Canada. That's for winter. We really won't focus on summer since we're already in summer right now. Again, the major implications are for winter, and then it's kind of like the country split in half really if you like really were to visualize it, like the southern portion of the US cooler and wetter, and then for the most part the northern part of the United States drier and warmer. So you can see a lot of above average precipitation across the Gulf of Mexico and as well in parts of the southwest, while you see drier portions of the Midwest. And not necessarily, you probably won't be as dry in the Pacific Northwest, but again, every El Nino is different. I definitely would bank on it being sorry, this is temperature. No. This is precipitation and drier across the Midwest. So that's like the overall average, and if we were to go to like overall of extreme temperatures, again, you would just see the overall pattern of cooler temperatures uh in the southern part of the US and then warmer temperatures in the northern part. So again, it's like the country's just split in half basically. So El Ninos would favor a lot more moisture and stuff that happen in the winter for the southern part of the US, and then drier and possibly very warm in the northern part of the US. So let's go ahead and look at the overall like how this has been like transpiring for the past few months. As you see, every region in the Pacific for Enzo is above average, especially that 1 and 2 region. It's insanely above average. We're seeing nearly, it's again 2.7 degrees Celsius. That is ridiculous. And then as you go further west, we have again not as significant. They're still like 1.2 is still super strong, but like the point 0.5 is right on the threshold of neutral. But for the most part, it is extremely warm across the Eastern Pacific, especially off um, portions off of Ecuador and Peru and even Colombia. We're seeing like extremely warm temperatures, and you can just see it's dominant. Like there's no question about it being an El Nino this year. The question is how strong and possibly will it break the record. Another thing we want to look at is the OLR and as well the overall trade winds. This is going to again help determine like why we're seeing this surge of sea surface temperatures and like why it's so strong. So the first thing is we're also going to be talking about the MJO in this video a little bit, and specifically the OLR is like this just because of the MJO, what phase it's in. But El Nino could have implications on keeping the MJO in the region um, longer, or bring the MGO to that region. So OLR, again, we're seeing a lot of convection in the east central part of the Pacific, and this is what we're going to be possibly be worrying about a lot come winter. You can see there is a lot, or there's very lack of any like precipitation or cloud cover, or basically anything going on in the in the Eastern Pacific. Like we're not seeing anything in Papua New Guinea, anything off Australia. There's just a lot of suppression of precipitation, and that's going to be the worry for winter. If this pattern remains, it's going to be a huge drought concern for parts of the Philippines and Pacific and all that. While we see this precipitation and convection moving on an eastward in an eastward trend, which is again going to be what we're expecting to see in an El Nino. And then if we look at the trade winds, this is what's really having implications on the El Nino, and that is with the weaker trade winds. So with the weaker trade winds, we're not seeing that warmer water being pushed, or that convection or anything being pushed towards the west, where we would see it in like a La Nina or in a neutral, where it's like closer to Australia, and we're seeing a heavy monsoon season in like the Pacific, um, and towards the Indian Ocean. In this case, we're seeing weaker trade winds, and they're actually pushing towards the east. So that is the reason why those sea surface temperatures are super warm across this region and cooler across this region, the Pacific, where we're seeing that warmer water being pushed. And again, that's going to bring that convection, that's going to bring that instability, and that's going to lead to, again, where we see that convergence rather than divergence. So this is the big reason for this is also again connected to the MJO, since the MJO is moving, is the MJO is actually in this region. The thing is, could this strong El Nino possibly allow for the MGO to lag rather than pushing east so super fast? So could it stay? Could the MGO stay in phase 7 and 8 and even closer to 1 for much of the winter? That's the question. Could the El Nino? Obviously, El Nino isn't really like directly tied to the MGO, but it could have impacts on slowing it down and keeping it in phase 8, for example, longer. And that's what we'll be seeing with the OLR and the trade winds. Again, I don't want to go super duper crazy into like detail, because again, right now it's July. Uh, but again, things are just so set in stone, set in place, that it's like almost guaranteed what we're going to be seeing this winter. Like when we talk about like El Nino or La Nina, obviously not like the specifics, but it's like it's guaranteed what we're going to be seeing. It's just basically how strong will it be. And speaking of how strong will it be, here's the overall strength probabilities. And this is actually my first time seeing the strength probability. Last time I made a video or like got into this really website, it was just this. I've never seen their probability outlook, but this is very interesting. As you can see, there is a really, and I mean really high chance and confidence of having a not just strong El Nino, a very strong El Nino come fall and winter. So again, here's October, November, December, November, December, January. This is the time frame I guess you really want to focus in, and we're seeing up to a 60% chance of a very strong, like that's insanely high. That's again above a 2.0 degrees Celsius, and we're at a 1.7 right now, so we're just zero point 0.3 away, and we're in July. And there's forecasts up to possibly getting to 2.5, which would, I think, I don't know if 2015 was a 2.6. I again, like you guys can remind me on that. I don't know the specifics, but I think it was around 2.6, and we're forecasted and so with some models to get close to that. So again, it's looking like it's gonna be at least a moderate El Nino, which we're already at right now. And it's like whether it's going to be strong or very strong. Either way, we're going to be seeing super strong implications in the U.S. and across the whole globe. But this is a really strong like global event. Like this is not just impacting the U.S. And then looking at the future forecast, if we look again like that time frame, October, November, December. Oops, that is a very bad line. Like just in that square area where this is fall and winter, that's where we're looking to see its peak. So it could be at its strongest for fall and winter, which is just insane. Like one model has it, a few have it at 2.5, while the majority have it around just above 2 degrees Celsius. So It's looking like we can have a borderline very strong El Nino again. Like I said, most of the models have a 60% chance of probability, but again, we're right here at 1 point, or I guess this could be a little bit older, but 1.7 ish. The fact that we're just forecasted to keep climbing up as the winter and fall continue is just ridiculous. So we are really looking at a possibly very near historic event, or I mean, it is historic in itself, but possibly become the strongest. And here, like I said, the MGO, I know it's a little small right now. I had trouble trying to enlarge it, enlarging it. But again, we're in the MGO phase 7 right now, which is Western Pacific, and it's forecasted again to move eastward into the 8 region and then the 1 region. So for I guess most of the United States, specifically the South and East, MJO phases 8 and 1 favor a lot of precipitation, and as well with Central America. So it's forecast, like I said, that's why like the OLR was like that because the MGO is basically in the region. And again, if the El Nino really does continue to stay that strong, and the trade winds continue to weaken, could we see this MGO like kind of lag in phases 8 and 1? And if it does that, that would really forecast, I guess, more towards the fall. Because again, once we get to the winter, MGO will be in a completely different phase. But like, could this slow it down the MGO, or at least pull that precipitation in those warmer waters and towards the East Central Pacific rather than staying behind in the Indian Ocean, for example? So again, MJO not super like there's not really much to talk about necessarily for right now because things the MJO changes so often. But yeah, as of now, it's in a very favorable state, and it's going to forecast it to move into those regions that have a lot of implications for the U.S. when it comes to moisture and stuff like that. So we'll see where this is come October, November. But as of now, it's in a very favorable region. There again, you can see I'm not going to go much into this because we kind of already talked about it. The trade winds they're moving to the east, and that's basically where this is. I guess that you can just see the MGO right there with those really strong easterly trade winds. So again, trade winds are moving and are weaker than when you would see it in a typical year. So that's why we have these really warm waters across the Enzo region. And again, that's where you see the typical El Nino characteristics: the weaker trade winds and a lot of moisture towards the East Pacific and stuff like that. Which is also why we're looking to see a very, I mean, we saw with the typhoon, we're just going to see a super duper active hurricane season in the Pacific just because of this MJO and this El Nino, and it's also why we're seeing again the very slow start towards the Atlantic. So let's go ahead and look at, like I said, I'm gonna start comparing years. So here's an overall diagram of the intensities of El Ninos and La Ninas in the past few decades. And we're going to look at the strong and very strong El Nino columns because obviously why would we care about La Nina right now? And we already know we're not getting a weaker moderate El Nino. So like I said, 2015, 2016 was the last considered a very strong El Nino. And then we've had a few recently, 1997, 1998, and 2023 and 2024 was considered strong. So we've been seeing a lot of, I want to say a lot, but we've been seeing some hints of what we could possibly see this winter in the past. Like I said, 2015, 2016, I believe is considered the strongest El Nino to date, and then 1997. So I'm going to be looking at these 2 years since we're looking at possibly seeing a very strong El Nino rather than just a strong. So I want to go to show you guys what we could possibly see if we see the strongest El Nino category. So again, there's 2015, 2016, and 1997, 1998. You can just see how strong those peaks are. Again, 15 and 16 was way above the 2.0 minimum for being considered a very strong El Nino. Like I said, I think it was a 2.6 or 2.5, and there's 1997, 98, and 23, 24 is right there at 2.0. But yeah, let's go ahead and see. So this is actually almost exactly 9 years ago, July 13th, 2015. This is what the SSCs looked like in the Pacific in the summer of 2015. And can you spot a difference really compared to? I mean, if I can go back to like this, can you really see a difference? Like it's practically super similar. I don't know why it's exiting out, but like look at that. Look at this right now, and then look at 2015. It's super duper similar. So could we see a similar winter in the United States like we saw in 2015, 2016, or possibly even 1997, 1998? That's the question again. It's looking very similar, and specifically that 1.2 region is looking equally as warm as what we're seeing right now. Again, this is July 13th, 2015, and we're in July 12th, 2026. So like it's not like I'm looking in like the fall or winter. I'm looking at basically what today is just 9 years ago. So again, it's just some patterns to look at. And I want to show you guys what we saw in the winter of 2015, 2016. So here's the temperatures, and look how warm it is in the Midwest. I mean, it was a rather warm winter. It's not like we saw a super cold southeast, but we did see a basically average southwest. Like it wasn't like it was super duper warm in the southwest. So the El Ninos really favor the southwest more than the southeast when it comes to moisture and stuff like that, because you know the monsoon season and the Pacific Jet's basically right there with the Pacific. So you're going to be seeing more like different weather in the southeast, like less consistent. But you can see the southwest is basically average. Like it wasn't like super warm or anything like you would see in La Nina. But look how warm it is. I mean, look at the Midwest. That's what we're looking at possibly happening this winter, with just not a lot of polar air coming in, and that high pressure, that polar high, just staying up there. There's going to be seeing a super super strong high just staying there, keeping warmer air in. And just look at that. Like we're seeing dark reds. So, like I said, split the country in half. That's basically what you're going to be seeing. Really warm in the north central, Midwest, and parts of southern Canada. We're not looking at about seeing anything crazy, in the southern half. It could be still slightly warmer. Just because it's going to be El Nino doesn't mean it's going to be colder throughout the whole winter. It just means there could be more frequent and stronger, frequent, polar vortexes coming in and colder air. But definitely going to be seeing a lot, really frequent warmer air staying. Like I said, just because it's going to be an El Nino doesn't mean you're not going to be seeing, cold fronts or anything like that in the Midwest. It's just going to be overall those like 3-4 months of winter. It's going to be pretty much above average. And look at the precipitation. Just look at that. The southeast, Pacific Northwest, just getting a ton of rain. And moisture is really going to be concentrated more towards the southeast and south central when it comes to El Ninos. Pacific Northwest sometimes can be rather dry, and then other times it could be rather wet. But again, you're going to be seeing this year had a slightly above average precipitation in the Midwest, but for the most part, you should expect drier weather. But just look at the southeast, man. South Carolina, the Carolinas, it just got drenched that winter. And even though it was a little bit warmer, you just saw a ton of precipitation. Doesn't mean it's gonna be snow. Precipitation gonna be rain, sleet, all of that. It could be just be a ton of rain this winter. Who knows? But overall, expect a lot of precipitation. 1997, 1998. Look at that. Look how similar it is. The temperatures. That same area. Oops. Yeah, there it is. That same area just super warm. 97, 98 was a bit warmer, and there you can see that cooler weather in the southwest, and that's what I'm talking about, where you just see that country split in half, cooler across this part. It's still a little bit above, but it's like barely, like it's like basically average. Then compare at least to the Midwest. So slightly, if anything, barely above average temperatures in the southeast, and then you can see that cooler weather in the southwest. So very favorable monsoon season. Could be very helpful if we get moisture in the southeast as well. I mean, the southeast is just, I mean, basically the whole country's been in a drought. But look at the Midwest, really, really warm. So if I were to bank where it's going to be, see the warmest above average temperatures, it's going to be the Dakotas, Midwest, and upper northern plains this summer, or sorry, this winter. Here's some moisture here. In this one, you can see in this year a little bit drier across northern parts of the U.S. And then again, the southeast still above average. And look at the Pacific Northwest in that one. So I'm not going to have an actual forecast map or anything for the winter, but based on this, based on the years we've been looking at that were considered very strong El Ninos, it looks like it's going to be very, very dry across parts of the North United States, and super duper warm based on looking at years that are very similar to this year, and then very moisture or very wet, and a lot of well needed moisture across parts of the southern United States, again, based on looking at what we're seeing now in overall averages. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to remain consistent, posting every few days. Definitely not every day, especially once I get to school. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and yeah, see you guys later.